My name is Paul Chrisman. I'm with Quest Software Public Sector, and on behalf of Red Hat and DLT Solutions, wanted to welcome you to the Verizon Center for hopefully a very informative and collaborative next few hours before we get to go and yell and scream. Hopefully you all are staying for the hockey game this afternoon as well. So I'm going to kick things off. I'm going to welcome our moderator, and I'm also going to give you a little bit of an outline on the agenda for the next few hours. We have two panels, one with industry and one with actual public sector IT professionals, executives who are working through beyond data center consolidation and looking at security monitoring and auditing. The purpose of having two panels is to not do a compare and contrast or a true false or a good bad or otherwise. And it's also not our objective to have a commercial that you have to sit through in order to get to the good stuff. We actually want these panels to be a dialogue. This is a nice, comfortable environment. You guys can ask questions. And we'd really like it to be something that you all get what you came for rather than what our prepared remarks are. So we'll have two panels. We'll have a Q&A session in between, and then we'll wrap up. Hopefully we'll be wrapped up at about 6:15, 6:30, and the hockey game starts at 7 o'clock. I hope when you registered you've got your tickets. Yes, everyone's got their tickets. Excellent, good. If you don't, see the folks at the registration table on the way out. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jim Flyzik, and Jim is going to be our moderator for this afternoon. So, welcome, Jim.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that a lot, and thanks for being here, everybody. We decided what we were going to do here, rather than go through bios and all that, because you have them in front of you, is we're all just going to take a minute or two just to tell you just a few brief remarks about us. So, I'm Jim Flyzik. I spent 28 years in government. I was 18 years at Secret Service. I was a CIO there before I guess they called it CIO. I then went up to Treasury in charge of telecom, and then headed up Al Gore's Reinventing Government team, wrote both Access America and Reengineering for Information Technology, those two reports. So if you want to talk about who invented the internet, we can get into that at some point in time a little bit later. I then became the CIO at Treasury for 7 years and actually worked on the executive order to create the CIO Council and became its vice chair and was vice chair of the Federal CIO Council for 4 years. After 9/11, I went to the White House as the technology advisor to Tom Ridge, where and worked for a year and a half writing the strategy, IT strategy for Homeland Security. And when the department became official, my job in the White House was abolished. That's when I retired from government. Now I do a little consulting, and I do thought leadership events with Tom Trezza. I chair the FCA Homeland Security Committee. And essentially, I still believe I am a government person. Everything I do and involved in is try to find ways to help government be successful and government and industry partnerships to work and be successful. So, which is why I get involved in these kinds of things, because I think these are the places where you see those kinds of exchanges take place, where the government learns some things, industry learns some things, and the more we talk together, I think the better the results will be. With me on the show is Dmitry Kaganksy, the Chief Technology Officer of Quest Software, Gunnar Hellekson, Chief Technology Strategist, Red Hat, U.S. Public Sector, and Van Ristau, the Chief Technology Officer at DLT Solutions. I'm going to ask each one of them to briefly give you a rundown of what their key points about what they do, and then we'll get into the actual questions. We think it's better that if I were going to read bios, it'd be like typical bios. They're all really smart, and they went to lots of colleges, and they got a lot of awards, and it's a lot of important jobs. Same stuff you see. But let's start with Van. A little bit about yourself, Van.
Some of us have a lot of gray hair too.
Why are you looking at me when you make that comment?
We were just telling stories about mainframe days a few minutes ago. So DLT Solutions is probably one of your vendors. We represent a number of software companies, and we do about $800 million a year in software sales to federal, state, and local governments. So we have a pretty good handle on things that are going on throughout the public sector, and what rises above ambient, in my view, is the thought that what we're going through now is a period of creative destruction. We're moving from mud huts to little islands of skyscrapers, and we're sort of inventing the concrete and the steel girders as we go. It's still, in my view, a very fluid process, and things like when we're talking about security today, how do you come up with a consistent, mutually agreeable information security model for a data center that now serves 10, 20 disparate entities that before had their own information security policies. A lot of these issues with respect to security and monitoring and automation in general are still being worked through, and we're dealing with that with our customers on a daily basis.
Good, thanks. Gunnar, a little bit about you, your position you're in now.
Sure. So I have this ridiculous title, Chief Technology Strategist for Red Hat's public sector group. I'm not even 100% sure what that means. It has something to do with talking on panels like this, and it has something to do with briefing our sales guys, and I talk to engineering. But I think mostly what I try and do is take everything that Red Hat is as you guys probably already know, is the world's largest open source company. We're about to hit $1 billion this year, which is not bad for selling free software. So my job is to make sure that all the innovation that's going on in the open source community gets exposed to our customers in government, and likewise making sure that the requirements that our government customers have get communicated back into our engineering group. So I get this great position where I get to kind of straddle the two worlds, very much like Jim, actually.
Good, terrific. Yeah. Thanks, Gunnar. Dmitry?
Yeah, and my name is Dmitry Kaganksy, and much like Gunnar, I've got a similar sort of role over with Quest Software. I'm assuming most of the people here are familiar with Quest Software. If you're not, you'll find that we're a systems management company, similar to Red Hat in that we're a software company, but dissimilar in that you'll find us throughout a lot of different platforms. We don't focus just on open source or just on Microsoft or Oracle or any of the other vendors. What we do is we shore up the infrastructure that you have. And like Gunnar, I've got a similar sort of role where I'm in the federal group, briefing the sales guys, working with our product teams, talking to customers, obviously participating in panels, and also making sure that the things that we're doing as a company are servicing the mission of the federal team and our federal customers. A lot of the work that I do does involve taking back what we're finding in government back to our commercial counterparts, and then taking what's being done on the commercial side and adapting it to what government needs as well.
Okay, great. Let's get into some issues. Let's start with, you're all CTOs and you're working across government. You're getting a good picture. I believe all of you are in roles that look across, not in just specific agencies. Are you seeing big differences in approaches, for example, between DoD, Intel, civilian? We've got government-wide committees. I mean, does it appear to be everyone moving along sort of at the same pace, doing the same types of things? Or are you seeing vast differences and changes depending on those communities? Start with you this time, Dmitry. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so surprisingly, unlike a lot of initiatives that get started in the government, we think data center consolidation specifically does have legs. People have taken to it. There's a lot of discussions, actually a lot of actions around it, right? There's constant, ongoing changes, updates. Centers are getting consolidated. We are seeing different behavior, though, right? When you look at someone like DoD has traditionally been very mobile, very adaptive. A lot of changes happen to it on a regular basis. So for them, data center consolidation is almost part of the norm for them, and they're used to it. You take a look at some of the civilian agencies, from what we've seen, they've been built up for years, and a lot of them now are getting tasked with scaling down and consolidating, and that's, somewhat eye-opening to them. And then you start looking at groups like even Homeland Security. Here's an agency that didn't exist 10 years ago.
Right.
So for them, they got built up very big through a consolidation effort, and now they've got to collapse everything down into fewer, smaller, really enclaves or groups, and all work together as well.
Yeah, it's so easy to do, I'm sure. CIA just says, hey, let's all get together and go into one building. Everybody says, yep, sure, great. We know the way it works. What do you think, Van? Let's go to Van. What are you seeing out there in terms of consistency across government?
In my view, it's very inconsistent. There are certain agencies that are 3, 4, 5 years ahead of those that are just starting out on the journey. But the interesting thing for me is the way some agencies are doing it seemed to me, as an outside objective observer, to be a bit more smart than others. For example, they're looking at standardization on the front end. We're only going to have 2 databases, guys, or 3.
Right.
Live with it, and that requires leadership and some management strength to make that work. ITIL, I mean, building in good practices from the start. I mean, I think everybody would agree that in 1985 you would never start out at the end point we're at today. I mean,
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense. So we have the opportunity to rebuild, and as we do that, we should take advantage of the best practices in industry and commercial,
Right.
and as well as good government processes.
Right, I
also.
think you're exactly right, and I did have a chance to meet with Steve Van Rockel, the new CIO replaced Vivek Kundra, and I made the point, we really need to do whatever we can to keep the investment money in place to do the data center. The end state is a no-brainer. I mean, you close all this thing, but you got to get there. And if the Congress isn't going to have the money to do it, then how do you get there? That kind of an issue still is there. So it might take creative approaches and creative procurement acquisitions and so forth. Gunnar, what are you seeing from your perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting. I agree very much with what Van said. I mean, the agencies who already had kind of a sensible application portfolio management strategy, right? They are in a much better position to make the transition because there's less friction. They had already done maybe not consolidation, but at least a standardization, right? Whereas agencies, I'm reminded of a very good customer of ours. They did a major consolidation. This is years ago before they were ordered to.
Right.
They did the consolidation and then basically had created a computer museum. Right, they had a piece of equipment from basically every decade, every year for 40 years in one data center.
Wow!
And it's taken them.
And they were operational, or they were just there for?
No, they were operational.
Oh.
They were running actual mission critical workloads, and so this was a good lesson for me anyway, in that the importance of. As you say, some are leading with standardization. The ones, I wouldn't divide it between civilian, DoD,
Right.
Intel, that kind of thing. I would say that those who have had kind of a sensible kind of enterprise portfolio management approach are much further along on the data center consolidation strategy because there's a lot less friction.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people that had started virtualizing their environments and going to standardization, all that, for them it's going to be moving newer stuff. The last thing we want to do is move all of our old stuff into a new building, and not really do any modernization along the way. Let's talk a little bit about Red Hat and Quest and open source since you're here. And I'm sort of hypocritical on this one because I converted the entire Treasury Department to Microsoft at one point in time back in the late 90s.
Still trying to fix that, by the
way. And big enough that Bill Gates actually came to the signing thing, and I remember that because I spilled a can of soda on the table while it was heading towards him, and all those people came running over and intercepted. It was almost like Secret Service days. But now, had I looked at where the world is today and was starting over, it would be a totally different thing. I've become a big open source guy, largely since I started using Android operating systems and things like that, and seeing how easy it is to interoperate and pull things. But there's still a lot of debate out there. So let's talk about that. Red Hat's very much on the open source side. I think Quest, on the other hand, supports many, many platforms, including open source. Do you think the move to cloud and the need for interoperability and the need to be able to, if you take cloud to its extreme, you want to be in a position to pull in applications whenever you need them. And I think that lends itself to open source kinds of things. On the other hand, Quest supports both open source and other platforms. So where do you guys see it going? Do you think this is going to be a boon towards more kinds of open source approaches? We'll start with you, Gunnar, since you're the open source guy.
So I promised Dmitry I'd run out the clock on this question. Yeah, I think it's a worthwhile question, but also I think that the question of open source versus proprietary is almost doesn't matter. It's really about the software and the capabilities, and open source is one way to get a great set of capabilities. We happen to believe it's the best way to get a set of capabilities, but you're exactly right that interoperability and being able to work with all different kinds of platforms. And also I want to make explicit, we say open source, and a lot of people say open source is kind of code for the Linux operating system, or open source is a code word for an alternative to Windows.
Right.
There is a tremendous amount of open source out there, which is much more than just an operating system, right? You got application servers, you got databases, cloud platforms, and I think if you look at who's moving to, as an example, you look at who's moving to cloud and what's happening with the data center consolidations, using these data center consolidations as a forcing function.
Right.
Government is following industry and moving to open source platforms overwhelmingly.
Right.
They're getting off of the old proprietary systems and moving onto systems that give them, could be cheaper, maybe more choice.
Right.
Maybe it's just that's where the talent is.
Right.
But there is a strong correlation, although maybe not a causation, between this move, these consolidations, and the adoption of open source. Absolutely.
Right. Let's go to Quest. Dmitry, what do you see in terms of the trend with open source versus other platforms?
Yeah, and we're definitely seeing a rise in open source. I don't think there's any dispute in that, but it really comes down to the number of platforms, types of platforms that are out there, and what people are doing, and especially the mission-critical systems. Like you said, you've got a customer that's out there, and they've got that whole computer museum, right? And we come into customers that a lot of times will say, we want to move to the cloud, we want to use the latest and greatest, all the new things that are out there, but we also have mission-critical systems that are still on Microsoft, that are still on mainframe and mid-range systems. And what we're seeing is that it's going to be a combination of things. Open source is certainly going to be out there. I think there's going to be a lot more done with open source around the management side of things and controlling those systems. But the other legacy systems, if you want to call them that, or the previous systems, are going to continue to live on. A lot of time and money has been spent on a lot of them. You've got systems that have been running for years that are perfectly capable. I think people are going to want to take those systems and do more with them, but they are going to continue to live on. So Quest is straddling that fence of, we're going to work with open source, we're going to work with the enterprise packages as well, with all the older legacy packages, because a lot of our customers are saying, we'd like to move to a more modern environment, but a lot of times we can't, or we don't see a need to. There's no financial reason to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a real challenge. I know the data center consolidation publication that Tom puts out, I wrote an article in there and talked about that very issue being. Now, Van, for you, it's a little different picture, because being a value-added reseller where you're looking across, are you seeing any trends here one way or the other in terms of platforms for data center consolidation and security and auditing?
Well, as Dmitry was saying, to echo a little bit of that, clearly the funding levels are not there to do wholesale rewrites of major mission-critical systems, and that's just a fact of life. There also is the issue of training and the level of skill level of the individuals in the data centers. They may not be able to, in this dispersed data center environment we have, you may not have the right skill levels to support a particular new technology, if you will. So it's a mix, and right now we think it will continue to be so. But as data centers are consolidated and the new skills that are required to run and manage virtualized environments, then the need for some of these more sophisticated tools such as Quest has, and the capability of some of the operating environments, application servers, cloud-based approaches to the traditional way of delivering services that Red Hat has are really gathering steam.
Yeah, terrific. That's an interesting thing. And I do have a comment. My comment is when our kids get into the workforce, this whole question is going to be drastically different because they're going to have total different expectations of how quick it's going to be to get new apps into environments. They're going to say, where do I go out and where do I punch the button to get the new app? So that'll change the thing. And the other thing I have just thinking about this as we were talking here is if we really start doing all these things as a service, infrastructure as a service, cloud as a service, then does it really, is the issue of the technology and the specific technology, doesn't it really become a service level agreement where the provider should be providing whatever solution best meets the requirement as opposed to, and the culture issue for the government people are, will we ever get there? Where the government people will write the service level agreement defining a result and let the providers decide the technology. That's a real culture shift, I think, that's going to be a challenge over time. So just any comments on that?
Go ahead. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that actually because I just came back from a trip to the UK to talk with my counterparts over there and meet with folks in the Ministry of Defense and a bunch of the integrator community working with the UK government. They have that. And it's interesting to see what happened. Is that the wheels have effectively come off the government IT enterprise when the government doesn't have the ability to intervene and define implementation details or demand certain processes. The government loses control over its portfolio, and the UK government is struggling right now to put the wheels back on.
Yeah, that's going to be a very interesting culture challenge to watch because if you take it to its sort of like where cloud's going, that everything as a service model, it says that the technology decisions are made based on what result you're trying to find. What do you think, Dmitry?
Yeah, and I think ultimately it is going to get to that point. The way I actually think it's going to happen is it's already happening on the commercial side, obviously. And one thing that I know Paul Chrisman had mentioned in the past, I'm going to put him on the spot and you can ask him about it later, is that at the state and local level, there's a lot more of that happening already, where there's a lot more cooperation among the different state and local agencies. And now we're starting to see a shift where the federal government is looking to other governments that are within reach, asking them, what are you doing? What are you seeing? And they're getting that feedback already. They're already seeing that, we are using software as a service. You've got the state of Michigan, you've got California, New York, all these large states that have to do something. They're moving faster, and the feds are looking to them, whereas before they might have been much more siloed off. There's starting to be a lot more dialogue. Yeah,
I think the budget pressures are going to push things that way too. It's not going to be like everybody's going to be able to have their own widget. If the widget can be shared. What do you think, Van? Any comment on that?
Well, what was it in the late '80s? I guess we went through the big transition to COTS software. Before that it was custom. That's the only thing that was built. So it'll happen, but the problem is right now, and we sell Google Apps and email and that sort of thing. So we're very, and we have a cloud advisory group that works with our customers, senior engineers. But the fact is that there's not much of a track record for these services as yet. It's one thing to have in your closet or in your 500 square foot space sitting in Des Moines, Iowa somewhere, a set of servers running 3 or 4 applications and an email server, and you've got pretty good confidence in that because that's the same thing you've been using for the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years. It's quite something else to go into the cloud and then wait for it to fail because you can't go fix it like you can if it's in the closet in downtown. So the vendors have to prove the reliability, operational availability, and the customers have to ensure that they understand what they're paying for in service level agreements and who's responsible for what, and we're just moving along that line, I think.
Right. Let's talk about savings coming out of this. We have the obvious things, real estate. If we consolidate and have less number of data centers, there should be real estate savings. We have the energy consumption savings, again. Are there other places that you see big opportunities for savings? Let's start with Dmitry again. Dmitry, are there areas where you see opportunities to really, really capture some meaningful savings other than the obvious real estate and energy?
Yep. The things we're seeing actually is there's savings around software and licensing itself, right? Mm-hmm. Between open source, but then also this evaluation of what are we really using?
Right.
If we've had one of everything, do we really need one of everything, or do we need to get down to just one or two database platforms? And I think there's going to be savings that are going to come down the line as licenses expire and don't get renewed.
Right.
And then hopefully, and this is my hope, is that there'll also be savings on the skill set side. That if we can consolidate all of the things that are out there, you'll need less varied numbers of people, right? That you can get to fewer types of technicians that you hire. There's more standardization, not just in software, but in the people and the skill sets that are needed, that things are much easier to manage, and that should provide savings as well, that people will be a lot more interchangeable across government, commercial, start using more COTS products to where the skill sets will be more readily available. You won't need as many specialists out there as you have today.
Yeah, they're excellent points. When you think about that, even on security, I had this debate on one of our radio shows with the security issues around cloud and data center, and some argue, well, I don't know, it's going to be raise more security issues, but others have said that, over the last 20 years, we have been fixing security problems as they break with Band-Aids, putting pieces in, pieces. At least the new environment gives you a chance to step back and see all these pieces we have and say, is there a holistic approach we can now take, and we don't need all these pieces? Of course, that does imply winners and losers, and some products would go away while others would come in, so it'll open up a whole new round of competition in the industry. Gunnar, what do you think? Anything you can add to the discussion around savings we can attribute to the approaches?
Yeah, no, it's an emphatic plus one to what Dmitry said. The consolidation, not just of the kind of physical hardware, but also on the software, is the number of people I've talked to are shocked at the number of databases that they own. Right. It's really instructive. And then once you've done that, though, once you've consolidated your software platform, moving to there are a tremendous number of operational efficiencies that you can get from this consolidation, right? So we talked earlier about the data center consolidation being a forcing function for standardization and also automation, right? If I'm going to go through the trouble to move all this stuff into one place, it doesn't make any sense to manage it in the same way I was managing it before, because then I got the same mess I had before. It's just now the same mess is just in one place, right? I don't just need faster toasters, right? I need a better way of managing it. So I think the efficiency from automation may very nearly dwarf the efficiencies that we get from the actual physical consolidation. Yeah,
but it's exciting stuff. I mean, it's people like me that are anxious to get to the end state. Keep looking out. When trying to find the agencies that are moving quick. And I must admit, I won't name the agency or remain nameless, but I read an RFI just the other day around this subject from an agency. It basically said, we don't know what we have. We don't know our volumes. We don't know how our transaction volumes. They listed out all these things they did not know, and they were saying we need somebody to come in and figure it all out and figure out what we have and then figure out a good, smart way to consolidate it. So, we do have some agencies yet that are in different levels here in terms of where they are. Some agencies, I think, are discovering things they didn't even know they had in the first place. Van, what do you think in terms of that savings issue?
What you said reminds me of a trip I took to the Czech Republic right after it was freed or became free, and there were no electric meters on the factories. They didn't bother to know what their cost of production was. We have a sort of a similar, don't want to carry that analogy too far, but a somewhat similar situation with IT in that you got the facility guys that are responsible for the plant, and you got the IT guys that are responsible for the IT stuff, and that's the first area of coordination that needs to come together better than it's doing now. And then once we get to some sort of plateau before we hit the ideal, we will at least have the opportunity to measure things. We'll have the capability to collect metrics on which to estimate future savings and see where savings can be obtained.
Let's talk a little bit about where we see this stuff going, what the future may look like out there, and get into, first of all, let's break it into a couple questions. One is, will it be successful? Will it be sustained? Is it going to be something that, X number of years out, we're going to declare it as a major success story in the government? What's your thought on that, Van? I know it's a tough question to answer in front of an audience.
It's going to take 5 to 10. It's going to take 10 years. I mean, to get to the next plateau, I think.
Yeah.
But there will always be the need for example, I mean, I can't imagine, and I'm not even familiar with the State Department's plan, but I can't imagine embassies around the world operating without their own data center, small data center.
Right.
And what happens if the government they're hosting them or cuts off the broadband? This is government. It's not commercial.
Right.
And we recognize that. Other people might not. But so there are particular situations that have to be treated very much differently within government and how we serve both the needs of government internally and citizen-facing services that we show.
Right. I shouldn't make light of this, but it's a long time ago. I'm sure it's not like this anymore, but I remember back when I was working some of these issues, we had in some of the embassies overseas, we'd have two individuals from two different agencies sitting literally right next to each other. You're there where Dmitry is and I'm here. We're doing email. And if I wanted to send an email to you, I would send it from my desk back to the United States to our computers to go through our firewalls and chain to turn it to go over to your agency's firewalls, whatever, to come back overseas for you to get the message. I could have just handed you a piece of paper, and saved a long round trip. But little things like that are still out there in terms of some of those culture issues. What do you think? Well, is it going to be successful, Gunnar? You think that we're going to look back and say this was a major success?
Yes and no. Right?
Okay.
I think. I don't think anybody can. I don't think we can credibly describe the success of the U.S. government in a data center consolidation. It's just too big an entity, right? We're talking about too many agencies, too many departments. Some are going to be wildly successful.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, we'll have some wildly spectacular failures that we can learn from.
Right.
So I think it's going to be mixed.
Yeah. What do you think, Dmitry? Is this going to all result in someday where we're going to be pouring the champagne, saying, "Man, we really did a great job with that stuff"?
Yeah, I do think it'll be successful, although I think it'll go out not with a bang but with a whimper. I think it's all just going to peter off at some point where there just won't be much left to do. Whether it's success or fail at the agency level is going to be questioned, but overall I think it's going to leave behind at least a thought process of a different behavior.
Right.
That people are going to go into putting up systems, whether it's cloud computing, internal, virtualized, doesn't matter what. They're going to now start thinking about, can this be consolidated before I even start? And I think that's really the true success that's going to come out of this program.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think it's going to go slower than most people think. I think there are political issues. We're in a presidential election year, as we all are well aware. There's going to be this intense pressure to keep budgets low. Therefore, getting the money to do the moves is going to be a real challenge. I already know several CIOs talking to me about their budgets have been cut, money that they wanted to use to do data center consolidation. So you don't want to just move old stuff. You want to do the modernization, but it takes some. That's going to create some very interesting challenges for acquisition approaches. Will we go to performance-based contracts? Will somebody look at share and savings again, where industry, which is supposedly sitting on these billions of dollars of cash because they don't know where to invest them, will there be acquisition vehicles that allow industry to fund the upfront data center consolidation and reap the benefits down the road, or will the risk associated with that scare off a lot of people? So I think there's going to be a lot of very interesting issues to watch there that I think are going to slow it down a bit because it just, you're going to have to work your way through those issues one by one. But I do think it's going to move forward. What happens what's next? What happens after data center consolidation? Is there something that we should be thinking about? You're all CTOs, so you're thinking out there in the future. Let's start with Van this time. Van, what's next?
Well, I think we're definitely moving more towards a services thought process when we the business managers, a lot of business managers within government and in commercial too, they want high availability, and they want a well-defined service, and they want to know what their role is and what their responsibilities are, and they want a high degree of assurance that they're going to get what they're paying for and what they need to do their mission. So as we move further out, services, I believe, or the definition of services as we know it as technologists will become more what we hang our hat on.
Mm-hmm. Let me go out and sort of like go out on a limb here. Could we have the day where DISA provides all the IT support to the DoD and GSA provides all the IT support to the civilian agencies? So we've consolidated database centers. Would that ever happen?
I don't think we'll ever get there. I don't think there's any need to.
Well, my challenge of you, I would challenge you to show me where there's a civilian agency where its mission statement says maintain IT systems.
Well, Vivek Kundra talked about the 3 data centers, that we're going to handle government. I just don't see it. I can't imagine that would work. I might be wrong.
Well, I guess it depends how far out we go.
I think the mission.
And obviously, I'm trying to get some interesting dialogue going here, and I'm seeing people out in the audience smiling and laughing, saying he's crazy. You got to be kidding me. That's not going to happen.
I think the missions are too diverse in order for a centralized service provider to manage those.
And that was the argument I used at Secret Service for years as to why I didn't join the Treasury network. Our mission is too diverse. We protect the president, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I fought for years to keep Treasury and Secret Service independent of the Treasury. It's back when Secret Service still. Then I became CIO of Treasury, and I had to try to convince the Secret Service to come be part of the network. So it's a lot of it looks a little different from the perspective you're at. Gunnar, what do you think? What's next? What's out there? Is there going to be like a continuation of consolidation and start mixing and matching and pulling the different agencies together that have similar things? I mean, I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, it would be a shame to see the consolidation be treated just as a cost reduction measure, because we've talked about some of the rewards that we get from it. Better visibility into the agency's enterprises, the better agility, right? Being able to respond quicker because we're not saddled with a computer museum worth of equipment, right? I think that in the same way that you look at Twitter. Right, Twitter. I know this is hokey, but you look at Twitter. Twitter is not possible to build Twitter efficiently without Amazon S3, right? Without a perfectly standard and easily understood storage mechanism, right? And I think in the same way, once we have kind of extremely pervasive, if we have pervasive standardization in the federal IT enterprise, it allows us to start worrying about much more interesting problems.
Right.
And with any luck, that combined with a kind of shorter procurement cycles, which is certainly going to become more popular over the next few years, shorter procurement cycles and the standardization will actually improve the amount of innovation that we can drive in federal IT.
Yeah, it's a whole other subject, the certification and accreditation process, how we can get this stuff in quick. But we won't go there because that'll be a whole nother debate. But remember there was a day when Google was a search engine and Amazon sold books, and it's interesting the way these markets are changing and working themselves out. We're going to hear from Dmitry about this, but then we're going to go to questions from the audience. So hopefully all of you start thinking about some questions here. We really want to get some dialogue with you going too. So after we hear from Dmitry about what's next, what's beyond this data center consolidation trend we're in now, what do you think, Dmitry?
Yeah, I'd have to echo what Van and Gunnar both said, but probably a little bit different. I do think, like Van, it's never going to be truly consolidated to having 3 data centers. But at the same time, I think agencies are going to get rewarded financially through budget allocations for collaboration or some sort of sharing. I think they're going to be pushed into it. So having that common platform like the Amazon analogy that Gunnar put out there.
Right.
I think that's something GSA could provide. That's something DISA could provide.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're going to be mission-critical systems that each agency is going to hold on to,
Right.
and they have every right to.
Mm-hmm.
But I think common services, there's absolutely no reason why they couldn't use a shared platform.
Right. I think you're exactly right. We have these shared centers now, which have had lukewarm successes here and there, struggled financially. But I do think, a lot of people are doing email as a service, SharePoint as a service, things like that. I think someone could make the case out in the future that why do we have every agency doing email as a service? Why don't we just have some one entity provide email as a service, some do share? I agree with you, though, the mission critical stuff, unique applications are probably never in our lifetime actually be coexisting in one agency that support another. But I do think the trend will continue. Let's leave some time for the audience before we shift over to the government panel. Who has a question for us? I know everyone doesn't like to ask the first question, so let's go right to the second question. Who's got the second question? Or comment, criticism? Yes, sir. Yeah, the question was for Tom's recording there that it appears each agency is building their own clouds now. Where is that? Is that going to change, or do you see some combinations? Am I paraphrasing that correctly? What are you guys seeing on that? Pretty much every agency wants their own private cloud, and are we going to move things into the public cloud or public domain? What's the trend there?
I'll go ahead.
Sure. Let's start, Dmitry.
We're seeing obviously different things. There are a few agencies that have embraced cloud computing and moving into it, especially the ones that work around high-performance computing. Others, frankly, some of them are giving it lip service, right? We had the whole Cloud First initiative, and there are agencies that said, well, we already have a website. We've published documents out there. We've got information out there. There's our cloud. We're done. Right. So I mean, that is happening. There are some agencies that are saying we're not going to do that. We don't trust it. We don't want it, and that's just a fact of life. That it's going to be a cultural shift before every agency really moves into a cloud environment. I think there's going to be a lot of resistance from a lot of different groups before that really happens. Right. Yeah.
OMB came out with Cloud First. I think it was Robert Kennedy said 1/3 of everybody is against everything all the time, no matter what it is. That's just human nature. Gunnar, what do you think on private clouds, public clouds? Every agency going to have their private cloud?
Yeah. No, it's a semantic trick, right? So you notice the conversation, and you see the three of us struggling to not say the word cloud because this is supposed to be like specifically a data center consolidation thing, but like it's hard.
How did we get into that cloud? This cloud stuff.
Yeah. Well, part of I think the way I now understand it, and I think it answers your question, is that there is this inevitable kind of inexorable transformation in IT that is moving away from kind of locked in, bulky, inflexible, and brittle systems over to more open, dynamic, flexible, and scalable systems, right? And that's on every axis from operating systems like Red Hat over to application servers, management tools, et cetera, et cetera. As each of these kind of items on the stack move and become more open, we're moving more towards this cloud environment that we're talking about, where everything is standardized, everything is replaceable, everything is extremely flexible. It's not brittle. It's not encumbered, right? And so I think you can think about data center consolidation as being one kind of milestone on that journey, and then cloud being over at the end of that journey. And you can imagine there being actually us being able to have just as much efficiency and saving just as much money, even with every agency having their own private clouds, as long as those clouds are interoperable, right, and can work together. So I think it may be a false choice to say, clouds versus data center consolidation. I think it's all part of the same general movement, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but But there is still the politics, right? So
There
are
is
still
politics,
people
yeah.
that'll say, when you pry it from my cold, dead hands.
Yes, that's right. Well, you notice that every shared services organization suddenly became a cloud provider,
Right.
When cloud first came out, right?
Yeah, so you do a lot. I used to get up and say stuff all the time that that I would just get up in public and I'd start talking about GSA will do this, because I wanted them to do it. Nobody GSA had ever agreed that, but if you keep saying it over and over and over again, people begin to believe it, and then someone has to do it. Van, you have a comment on this, and we'll go to the second question.
Yeah, I mean, I know of situations where bureaus actually have built off-premise private clouds in cages at a hosting provider who does that sort of thing, and just gotten points for data center consolidation and cloud also by moving the existing stuff into that off-premise hosted environment. Now, they virtualized a few things, but that's not really the direction we want to go, I don't think. It may be a stopgap, and it certainly does comply with the top-level policy. So,
Right.
where's the beef?
Right.
In those cases.
Right. And I'm not handing anybody up here, but I actually know of some agencies where you got people talking to contractors other than the contractors doing data center consolidation to try to figure out ways to not go and justify why they can do something else.
Unthinkable.
Yes, sir, on over here.
Consolidation, your biggest pushback is going to be from security teams. I'm a senior engineer for a federal organization that is a child to several other organizations, and there is a lot of headbutting between organizations without consolidation one.
Right.
They did agree, or were forced to, by top parents, to set up a big cloud not cloud, but a global address list for all the interagencies, so they didn't have to call any calls to find out which email address was all available. However, every time you try to consolidate, they always want to throw up a firewall, they always want to isolate systems, even with VMware, with the capability of PD-LANs, they don't think that's isolating, they want physical separation of isolation.
Right.
The biggest roadblock to face.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I actually know a company that's big in cloud. I won't name names, but they're building a gigantic facility that's going to be for data center consolidation. But inside, they're building like 100 independent SCIFs that are. So what they can do is move people in there, put them all in their own SCIF, and at least say they're all in the same building. So you do get real estate savings. I mean, so you do that, but it's the same issue you're doing now. Now on this, so let's talk about the security thing there, because there is some arguments being made, but you're exactly right. A lot of agencies, I mean, take one I'm familiar with. I'm sure Secret Service, TSA, Customs and Border Protection, ICE, everyone, FEMA, they're all saying we have different security requirements. Ours are, we have this, you have this, you have this. The missions are different, on and on and on. So yeah, that's clearly going to be out there. But then the counter argument is, well, now we have a chance to all get together and define a security architecture that can from starting from scratch, so to speak, to support everyone. What's your comments, the panel, in this?
Well, that was when we first started this conversation. That was one of the things that I brought up as what we're seeing with respect to security, which was one of our primary topic focuses, is that is very hard. It's a non-trivial issue, and it requires collegial working together to come up with an information security policy that is feasible, logical, and reasonable, that all can live with. Otherwise, how do you manage the data center? You don't gain many economies of scale that way.
Well, a lot of organizations don't trust the others.
Right.
Yeah.
The security team will argue, and as I've said in our meeting, we'll listen to them.
Yeah, and this is where I think the politics come into play. I do think security is a valid concern, but I do think it's also used as a political move to say we're not going to play nice with each other because we have these different standards. And I think at some point when budgets get pushed and pinched enough, they're going to have to get past that, right? Even though you're going to have these hundreds of different siloed, I guess, servers and racks and everything, at some point they're going to have to work together because there's just no money to keep doing what we're doing today.
So somebody in the chain of command has to take a attack-em approach and just take action, march off, and get everybody to fall in line. If there's no leadership to solve that problem, it'll never be solved.
Well, and it's also it's tooling too, right? I mean, Ron Ross here is here from NIST, and the work that he's done on the 853 controls has been invaluable in kind of moving this along, right? So at least get everybody using the same vocabulary for talking about the problem, right? But I think that there is one enormous missing item, and it can only come from the top down, and that is someone has to tell us what secure multi-tenancy looks like. There has to be an answer to this question, and it has to be independent of a particular piece of technology, but until we crack that, you will have to sit through more of those meetings with all of those security teams, right? And again, it's, industry can help, but there has to be somewhere in government, and I don't know where it comes from necessarily, is someone has to tell us when it is okay for one agency to sit astride another in the same data center, right?
Well, so many hours are wasted when you go through your scans, your security scans.
Yes.
So they identify all these vulnerabilities. The person running the scanning tool doesn't know anything about the results that it's producing.
That's correct, yeah. So
Right.
the scanning, by the way, security scans and automation tools, I'm going to use this as another opportunity to promote SCAP, which is a very exciting security standard. We're adopting it. It allows you to automate those security scans and actually have like objective measurements of, is the system secure? I don't have to take a PFC and stick them in front of a keyboard for 18 hours before I know whether a system's secure, right? I actually have automated tools now that can tell me that. So more widespread use of SCAP is certainly going to help. But again, knowing what the bar is, industry will jump over the bar. You just got to tell us, where that bar's at. Yeah.
You've got web traffic because different agencies want to allow certain things where other agencies want
Sure.
to block.
Right.
And so that leads to complication as well.
Yeah.
Although with a lot of the Microsoft tools, I think a lot of federation is going to take place to where they will cooperate on a Microsoft platform, email, the communicator, and tools like that. But when it comes to housing specific mission critical applications, they're going to want to do those themselves.
Right.
They're never gonna do it.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. I think Dmitry has a point though. The budgets are going to push that discussion to a higher level over time, and maybe we'll see some movement. It's not going to be fast. But I'm getting the signal here that it's time to move to the government panel. So I want to first thank Van, Gunnar, and Dmitry from taking time from their busy days, and thanks to Paul Christman for helping make all this happen here with the industry panel side. We still have the government panel side. We're going to take like a 5-minute changeover, so don't everybody run away. Everyone's got